So welcome. This is just a quick webinar about your first ultra. It doesn't necessarily have to be your first ultra. A lot of the things I'm going over, I think, are just good things to remember. They're things that I've forgotten many times. So sometimes like just a little refresher is also important before I'm running a race. And I designed this to be, I hope, general enough to be useful for any sort of ultra distance. Maybe it's not even an ultra distance. Maybe it's just a trail race, up to a super long, a much longer distance. So I hope that it is useful like that. What I'm thinking is that at the end I can keep it open for questions, but also if you have comments or questions, you can also write them in the chat and I'll try to pay attention. So my name is Emily. I'm a trail runner. I'm a coach. I'm living in Chamonix. I've been running for quite a while. I've done everything from road races to trail races to long ultras to short ultras. And I just kind of like dabbling in everything. And I've coached similar athletes of all different levels, athletes who are beginners, athletes who come and say, hey, I used to run and now I stopped and I want to just start running again, to athletes who have much more experience, people who want to run a road race, people who want to run 100 miles. So just a big range. And I guess I don't really need to introduce Oak, but I'll just do a short little overview because I'm sure you all found the app and that's why you're here. But basically, Oak is trying to create community events. And what we're doing with trail running is just trying to start more trail runs right now in and around Chamonix. So this is just a brief webinar. And then we also have next week, there's also a group run that I created. So I think one of the benefits of this is that we're not just virtual, but we can meet in person and we can run together and just hang out together. And I think that's kind of a nice refresher after doing so much online, is being able to see people in person. So it is race season. I'm going to start tonight talking about, assuming that you've already done the majority of your training. So this is sort of thinking about what are the things that I want to do before my race? What are the things I want to do, leading up to it, before and during, to really get the most out of my race and my race season. We're not going to talk a lot training theory and leading up to this point, but just I'm assuming like, okay, you've been doing your training, now the race is getting closer. What are the last sort of details that you need and you want to think about before jumping into your race? And I think the first thing that I really want to stress, and I'm probably going to repeat myself a lot, is that there's no one way to run an ultra. There's no correct way to run an ultra. There's no correct way to train. It's going to look different for everyone. And even from year to year of the same athlete, maybe training looks different each year. So I think that sometimes we get in this space where we go on Strava or we see somebody else running and we think, oh, they're doing this and they're doing that, and I didn't do that, so like I'm doing it wrong or I didn't do enough. There's no one correct way. There are a million ways, and I think that's kind of the cool thing about trail running and about ultra running. There's endless strategies. One of the things I think was super helpful when I started running was thinking about ultra running as problem solving on your feet. So you're going to be out there for a long time. That means tons of different things can happen. That means maybe you have a plan and the plan doesn't go according to plan, or something comes up that you didn't expect, but you have time. The great thing about being out there for so long is that you have time for all of this problem solving. Um, so what I think is really key to having a successful race or successful training is just having strategies. Um, and I think sometimes we kind of think, oh, I'm just not going to think about that issue, or that problem won't happen to me, or I don't want to, like, if I get blisters, I'll just deal with it when it happens. And I think this is not setting us up for the best situation, because then we don't have strategies when it happens, because we were expecting it just not to happen. So success is linked to having strategies. One thing I really want emphasis tonight, and I hope that you can all go home thinking, okay, I have all these new strategies or new ways of thinking about issues, so I have strategies in my race. So what we're going to do is sort of break down the lead up into your race, before, a little tapering period, and then during the race. So right now we're going to say we're in this before the race period. This could be a few months out or a month out. What do you want to do? You've done maybe the majority of a big chunk of your training, and now you're getting closer to race day. You want things to become more specific to the race that you're going to run. So one thing I really, really want to emphasize is just how can you simulate the race to the greatest degree possible. Obviously, you probably can't. Maybe you can't get out. Maybe you can get out on the course, but you probably can't get out on the course. So you just want to start mimicking what you're going to experience race day. That goes everything from the course conditions to your gear to your nutrition. So what I would do is just start. I'm going to use UTMB as a little example because UTMB is coming up. Let's say I'm going to run UTMB. What do I have to think about? Okay, it has long climbs, it has long descents. I have to run at night. Maybe I want to use my poles because there's a lot of climbing. There might be weather changes. Maybe I start out, it's super hot, and I get up to the high mountain, it's super cold. There's an evening start time that's kind of unique. So how can I mimic that, and how can I train my body to be somewhat used to that when the race comes along? Obviously, you're not going to go out and run the full race distance. So some of the scenarios you're going to put yourself through might not seem necessary. So maybe, for example, you live somewhere where you have hills, but they're not as steep as what you'd find in Chamonix. But you know that when you're there, you really want to use your poles. So my recommendation is going out and saying, okay, I want to practice with my poles. I'm going to practice, I don't know, like going down the street or going up this tiny climb. It's completely not necessary, but I need to practice it anyway. So just sort of mimicking things and pretending like you're in the race scenario. Another thing, especially with UTMB and especially with European races that I found, is there is a lot of required gear. And what I see is athletes look at the gear list. Maybe their training run is 3 hours long, so you don't necessarily need to bring all your gear. So you don't bring it. Then you get to race day, you have your whole pack all packed up, your bottles, your poles, all your fuel. You put your pack on and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so heavy. I don't know how to run with this. So one thing, it's like, absolutely put all your gear in your pack, put it on, run around your neighborhood, and get used to running just with this amount of stuff that you're going to be taking. And then take it out and use it. So take out your jacket, put your jacket on. And I know that it sounds silly, and I know that it sounds really basic, but I think that sometimes we don't do these basic things, and then we get into the race. We're in the middle of the race. We're tired. We've been running a really long time, and something as basic as like, where is my jacket? Oh, I don't know. So I'm not going to worry about it, or I'm not going to put it on. So just really start practicing. Another thing, thinking about this, mimicking your race, is thinking about hiking. I'm just going back to the UTMB example. UTMB has a lot of climbing. They're really steep climbs. You'll probably be hiking. Practice hiking. I know this also, again, let's say you live somewhere where you don't need to hike. I would hike anyways. I would just keep practicing it so that you get good at hiking, even if it's not the ideal terrain for hiking. And I'm going to get a little bit more into hiking later on. What else about gear? This is like a big mistake that I think everyone has done. And every time someone does it, they're like, well, that was so dumb. Use your headlamp, test out the batteries, see how long your light works for until it goes out. Just really get to know your gear. And then finally, nutrition. And I want to touch on this again a little bit later. You want to practice your nutrition. I'm going to say this again, but you really have to practice your nutrition, have to have it nailed for race day. And same thing. If you want to bring your fuel, if you want to bring your own gels, put it all in your pack and take it out on your hour run, even if you don't need it. Because I think another thing that happens is that you look at the gear, you say, well, that's not so bad. Put it in your bag. And then you put all your gels in. And then you realize how heavy the pack is. So really, we want as few surprises as possible on race day. You've just practiced everything. Avoid new things on race day. This is kind of a big one that I think races sort of tempt us with the race expo. We get to the race, we go to the expo, we see all of the newest gear, and we look at our old gear and we're like, oh, well, I don't know, my poles are a little bit heavy, so maybe if I get these new poles, they're a bit lighter, I could shave off some time. I do not recommend that. Please do not do that. I feel like we go to the expo and there are all these shiny, beautiful new pieces of gear, but the gear that is going to be most useful for you is the gear that you know. It's not going to be the most high-tech piece of gear. Buy it and then save it for your next race, but avoid trying new things. And finally, yeah, no, I'm not trying, I know this sounds a little bit negative, but like, no, something won't go as planned. But the point of tonight and the point of what you're going to do after this webinar leading up into your race is that you're going to have solutions and you're going to have thought through different scenarios and you're going to be ready. You're going to be ready to solve these problems. So when something doesn't go as planned, you're like, great, that's ultra running. I guarantee that no one's race goes absolutely perfect. Even if they tell you it went perfect, it didn't. That's impossible. So what we want to do is really plan for obstacles, think about them, and cannot stress this enough. Hope is not a strategy. We're going to have real strategies. You're going to have thought through different scenarios so that you have real strategy. It's not just like, gee, I hope I don't get blisters. Gee, I hope I don't get GI distress. You're going to have solutions. So one of the things I think is really useful is to write out a list. I think going into ultras, even if you run tons of ultras, it's kind of scary. You're going to be out there a long time. You're doing something challenging. Like I said, anything can happen. I think it's very normal to be nervous and to be worried about different things. And one thing that is super helpful is making a list like this. So here I have my list, kind of short. If I was really running this race, I would have way more things that I was worried about, just so you know. So here's the things I'm worried about. Let's say I'm worried about blisters. Great. So what are my possible solutions? Okay, I'm going to have an extra pair of shoes. I'm going to have a shoe change. Maybe I'll have a few shoe changes. I'm going to bring extra socks. And I'm going to have a first aid kit. And so then every time I'm like just sitting there worrying about my race, I look at my list of solutions and I'm like, okay, but I have these things. I know how to use them. I have tools, and it helps calm me down. Let's say my next thing is, okay, I'm worried about bad weather. What can I do? I'm going to bring warm clothes. I'm going to put them in a waterproof bag so that if there is bad weather, I'm not taking out my extra clothes and they're already wet. And I'm going to have some extra clothes. Maybe that's not even included in the mandatory gear list. I'm going to have them ready. So the next thing I really recommend is making a race plan. This is my template that I used for a race that I just ran Western States. It's a 100-mile race. It is a very, let's say, complicated logistically race. So I made this template. I want to open it here. Here we go. Okay, I made this template. I have all of my aid stations written out, and your template can be however you want it to be. Doesn't have to be like this. This is what I thought was useful. There's a million ways. I have my aid stations all organized here. The ones that are bold are the ones where I could receive outside support, so my crew could come to these points. I really didn't want my crew to get lost, so I have a very specific direction here. This is like, okay, they put it in their GPS and they find me. And then I have it worked out how many miles into the race is that? And about how much time will that be between segments, so between aid stations. And then I know, okay, so I'm going to be here, and then there's an hour. I have like a rough idea of how much time will go between aid stations, what I need to take at the aid station, and when my next point will be. And I think also organizing your race like this really helps you break it down. I really don't think it's useful in an ultra to break down your race by distance. So miles or kilometers, I don't think that's helpful. Because as you know, if you've ever run in the mountains before, maybe 5K takes you over an hour. Maybe it takes 2 hours. So if I'm breaking it down by distance, then I'm like, oh, 5K, that's not so far. And it takes me 2 hours. Then by the time I get there, I'm either frustrated or I don't have enough fuel or I didn't drink enough water and I'm just sort of thrown off. So what I would do is break down the race. There's a few ways. Maybe it's aid stations. Maybe it's big climbs. Maybe my race has 3 big climbs. And so then that's going to be in my mind. Okay, 1 climb is done. I have another one. That is, for me, a much easier way to break down the race. And as you know, ultra's a long way. So you want to break it up into chunks. I think mentally it's much easier to get our minds around that. So going back to my template, what I think is really useful about organizing it in this way is that I can see, here's the start. This is where the race started, Olympic Valley. The first point that I can see my crew is in Duncan Canyon. And okay, so that's a total, I think maybe 4 to 4.5 hours. Here I have the time of day so that my crew is hopefully ready and they're there by the time I get there. So now I know if, for example, in this race, I wanted to bring all of my own nutrition. I wanted to bring all my own gels. So then I know in my pack from the start to Duncan Canyon, I'm going to bring 4 to 4.5 hours of nutrition products. Maybe I bring a little bit more just in case. Here I also have action items. This was a really hot race, so I really wanted to stress, like, when I get here, this is the first point we're going to start to feel the heat. I have an icing strategy. We're going to put ice in my arm sleeves, in my pack, etc. I have notes and I have driving points for my crew. So I wanted to show you guys this. Share this. Okay, so I think sometimes when we've never run a race or we've never run a specific race, it's maybe hard to know how much time I'm going to be out there. So I think that it's useful to have maybe a rough idea. Maybe that's based off your training or maybe that's based off previous races. Or if you have no idea, I would go in. So using UTMB again as our example, UTMB has like a lot of really good information, really good data about everyone's race. I actually think that they're really good at this. Some races have more than others. I would go in, and if you have an idea about where you're finishing or where you're running in the pack, I think that's a good guiding point. So if I'm in the top 25% of the race, maybe I go in and just look at what times are people running in the top 25%. So using this example, we're going to run OCC. We're feeling super confident. We can run Katie Scheid's time. So I go in and I look at her results. This is from last year. And then I can see, okay, so this is where we're starting in Norcier. The first aid station is Champelac. How much time is that taking us? All right, so she took about 45 minutes. And then I can start to break it down and say, maybe if I'm running about her speed, I think I could do this. This is about what I'm gonna spend to the first aid station. And then I know, what do I want to take? In OCC, you can't have outside support, but there are aid stations, and the aid stations, maybe I'm probably counting on them for hydration or for fueling. So then I know from the first point to there, how much nutrition do I need to take? How much water do I need to take? I don't know if you've ever been in a race where the points between aid stations are really long and you have 2 bottles of water, but you feel like, oh, I could drink a lot more. So maybe I have to space it out so I don't run out of water in the middle. So I would just do this, and you could do it on the race website. You could do it on Strava. Strava also has a lot of good data that you can dig into. And I would just say, study the race as much as you can. Okay, so the majority of our training is done. We've done our race prep, and the race is getting closer. Now it's time to taper. I'm sure all of you know at least the basics about tapering. Especially for training for an ultra, you've been doing a lot of work and you need your muscles to repair. The way that our muscles repair is relaxing, resting, recovering. I think that sometimes we think, okay, this means I'm just not running, or I'm running almost nothing at all. And it's not necessarily that. Everyone is going to respond slightly different to a taper. So I don't want to present like a formula, because I also don't think that there is a formula. Every athlete is different. And what I would recommend is trying your taper, write down what you do, and then see how you feel. This is going to be the most useful thing that you can do in your running career, is take notes and study yourself. You're your own, I don't know, you're like the lab rat, and you want to study yourself, see what happens, and then see where you need to make changes. So yes, you want to run, and I would say you don't want to just do easy runs. You want to do a little bit of intensity, but the intensity will be less than what you've been doing. So maybe you go out and you do a few strides or a few pickups, just something that's slightly more intense, but again, lessening what you've been doing. And I think that one thing that I've noticed with my athletes and myself is that tapering is hard. And I think that sometimes we think, oh, I'm just lowering volume. Like this is going to be fun. This is going to be great. I'm going to feel amazing. And I don't think it's always that way. You don't always feel amazing. I know that sometimes it's easy to feel like little niggles or like little things are sore that weren't sore before. And then maybe you go out and you have a run and the run like doesn't feel good. That's normal. And don't let that get into your head that everything has to feel great. So I think sometimes in the taper, We go out and have a run. Maybe it's an easy run. We're lowering volume. So we think this is going to be fine. And the run just doesn't feel great. And then we think, oh, maybe I'm not ready for the race. Maybe this means whatever, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't mean anything. Really, tapering is just, it feels weird. And if it feels weird for you, I think that's totally normal. You've been training your body to do one thing for a really long time, and now you're changing things up. And that will have an impact, I think, physically and emotionally and mentally too. So it's totally normal. My recommendation is go out and try to do maybe some things you don't normally do. Like if you haven't had tons of time to hang out with your friends, go hang out, like distract yourself. Go do something that you think is fun. And super important, this time is for resting and recovering. So I don't know if you can get an extra hour of sleep. I would try to do that. Also really important to keep hydrating and eating well. I think another thing that happens is that where our training volume's up here, we're super hungry because our body is just going, just working so hard. And then we're reducing things. And all of a sudden it's like, well, I'm not really that hungry. Really, really important time to hydrate and eat because you're repairing your muscles during this taper time, during this recovery period. This is when your muscles are going to repair themselves. Resist the temptation to cram. Again, a few things that I see, for example, with UTMB is that people come to Chamonix, they're in this beautiful place, and they're like, oh, I want to run there, and I want to run there, and like, no, I'm here, so I have to do whatever that climb, and it's really hard to hold back because you're probably, if you're going to a special race, you're in a place that maybe you'll never be in again. But resist this temptation to cram. If you are traveling, try to get there early. Yeah, take care of yourself. And the most important thing, trust your training. I think that during this tapering period, and it's really easy sometimes to start to doubt or look at what other people are doing. Trust what you've done. One thing that I think is really useful is going, if you have a training log or on your watch or on Strava or wherever you have your training, go back and look at what you did. And if you need to, write it down or make a chart. Look at everything you've done because you've done a lot of training up to this point and you trust yourself. Boost your confidence. You want to be like your greatest cheerleader during this time. Okay. It is race day. So before it's race day, going to this first point, know what your morning plan is. So I'm going to know what I'm going to eat. I want to know what time I want to wake up, what I'm going to eat. If I maybe have a ritual before my race, and I'm going to have everything organized. Don't organize your gear the morning. Have everything ready. Organize it the night before. With your breakfast, you want to have practiced that. So I would say you don't have to do it every time you go out on a long run, but take one day that's a long run and pretend that it's race day. So if I want to wake up 2.5 hours or 2 hours before the race, I'm going to do that before my long run. I'm going to pretend I'm going to the race. I'm going to eat exactly what I think I want to eat for the race and then see how I feel. And I want to time it sort of similar. So if I want to eat 2 hours before and then I want to snack an hour before, whatever it is, you know exactly what you're going to do. And if you're traveling to a different country, I would try to replicate it as much as you can, or even think about something that you can just bring with you. So if you want to have oatmeal, think about the oatmeal that you can bring with you so you have that breakfast that you know and trust. And then I think it's important to have our goals in mind. So maybe you have an A, B, and a C goal. Probably heard about this a lot. I think these goals can be anything you want. Sometimes I think we really stress, or we're so focused on, my goal should be a race result, a place result, a time. And it could be those things, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. You could have multiple goals. You could have a time goal, and then you could have, I don't know, a nutrition goal. You could have a race strategy goal. So maybe you work out your race strategy. You want to hold back until 20K, and then you want to start pushing. Maybe that's a goal. So your goals can be whatever you want it to be. Don't necessarily feel like it has to be like, I want to be top 10. It doesn't have to be that. You get to define what is meaningful for you. And then finally, know your why. Like I said, you define what's meaningful for you. If your why is, I like running, I like being in the mountain all day, this makes me feel good. That is, it could be anything you want. I think sometimes also we have a tendency to like make it really big. It can be really big, but it also doesn't necessarily have to be. So I would say define your why, have it in your head, race morning, really quick, go over, this is my A, B, and C goal, and this is my why. And that could take you 5 minutes, but it's something that you've already thought about. You're just reminding yourself, and then you're like, okay, I'm ready to go out there. When the race gets hard, oh, I know what my why is. I know why I'm doing this. And you're not in there trying to scramble for a reason when things are really difficult. Okay, so gear. I've already stressed this, but you really want to know your gear before you get to race day. And you want to avoid trying anything new. What I want to go over here really quickly, I know that you guys have already done this because this goes without saying, but I want to look at the list of mandatory equipment. So this is for all the UTMB races. I think this is pretty straightforward, but the main thing that I want to stress is there's a lot of mandatory gear for this race, but I also think that sometimes on these race websites where they have recommended gear, we have the tendency to think, I just want my pack to be as light as possible. I just want to take the least amount of things. But sometimes in these recommended gear, there are actually very useful things. So I would look through it and see what's in there. And I mean, your pack is going to be what your pack is, right? Like, we have to carry packs. We're doing trail running, we're doing ultra running. And I would just look through what the recommended gear is and really think about it and think, is this useful for me? Maybe if I chafe all the time, taking a little tube of Vaseline is going to be really useful and doesn't weigh that much, right? So yeah, that's just a friendly reminder. Don't forget to look at the mandatory gear list. And now we're on to power hiking and poles. So if you are running an ultra, I really hope that you're not using a pole like this man has here. But to be fair, I have run a race where I had actual branches as poles. I want to talk a little bit though about power hiking and poles. I think that there's two fairly unique and interesting aspects of ultra running. And I'm sure this has happened to me many times where I'm running along and I think I'm like really making ground, and someone passes me hiking up a hill and they seem to be doing no effort at all. So this is kind of like one of the big things is, when should I power hike? When should I run? Should I try to run the entire race? And again, I know I'm going to say this a million times, but it really depends on you. But going back to our point in the beginning, if you are going to be power hiking, if you think you're going to be doing a lot of hiking, you're going to run UTMB, let's say, you need to go out and practice it. And I think one of the things, power hiking can be a really useful and really just a really useful strategy if you learn to do it correctly and if you learn to become strong at it. I think that sometimes we associate walking or hiking as resting and recovering, which it can be, but it doesn't have to be. You could power up a hill just by hiking. So when you're training, one of the things that I have my athletes do sometimes is kind of switch between running and hiking as a workout. So maybe instead of using the running segment as the like harder segment, we're going to say the running segment, you're going to recover. So you're going to run it really easy. And then the hiking segment, you're going to push. So you're training yourself as well. When you're hiking, it's not just about walking. It's walking with intention. It's hiking. It's power hiking. That's why we give it this fancy name, because it can be really fast and really speedy. And if you use it correctly, I think you can divide up the workload a little bit because you're using different muscles from running. So just to go back to our point in the beginning, practice it. If you have a race with a lot of hiking, you might be hiking more than you normally would be in your training runs. If you don't live in a place that's super steep, I would still practice it. Okay, poles. Yeah, so poles, I know that some people love poles and some people absolutely will never use poles. Poles, I would say, is the same. You got it. You have to practice with them. You have to train with them. If you're using them correctly, again, you're going to divide up the workload. Some of it will be in your arms, some of it will be in your legs, right? You're dividing it between upper body and lower body. If you don't practice this, though, your upper body either won't be able to sustain the effort or will be really tired. I think there are pros and cons to using poles, but I think you can overcome the cons if you're practicing with them and if you feel comfortable. And if you don't feel comfortable, I also think that, again, just because everyone's using them or you think that everyone's using them, but you don't feel comfortable, then it's not going to be advantageous for you. So what are the cons? You're going to have to carry something else. You're going to have to figure out how to open and close them and pack them away with ease without thinking about it, without fighting with them. You're going to have to eat while you have poles in your hands. So again, my recommendation would be first practice with them. If you feel good with them, if you feel like it's helpful, great, use them. If you don't, that's fine. Don't use them. Yeah, it will be detrimental if you're not super comfortable with them. And another thing is that I would really focus on looking at the race profile and organizing where this is a really long climb, and that climb I want to use my poles. Maybe the next climb is short, so taking them out and putting them away again isn't beneficial. The more that you study the race profile, the more that it's in your head, the easier this will be while you're in the race. So I would have that sort of worked out in your mind before you start. Okay, race nutrition. There's a lot about race nutrition. I just kind of want to go over some basics. Ultras are eating contests on your feet. I'm sure you all know this by now. The more you can eat, I think the better that we feel. But the thing is that it's very important is that you have to train your gut, and you can train your gut. If you are doing your long runs right now and only taking a little bit of fuel or not fueling at all, or maybe you're taking in one gel every few hours, and then you get to the race and you say, well, I really I want to get my best performance, so I'm going to eat a ton. Chances are likely that you'll have GI issues. So you want to train this. The basic guide, I like to measure nutrition with grams of carbs. Some people use calories. I think carbs are more useful for me. The basic guideline is 30 to, that's on the low end, per hour to 90. But again, this needs to be trained. So what I would do if you don't know what you're taking in, because sometimes even for experienced runners, this is very difficult, because maybe you have a race plan, maybe you have a nutrition plan, you put it all in your pack, you eat half of it, you don't know what you ate, you don't know what you didn't eat. I think it's not always very clear what we're consuming. But the first thing that I would do is try to figure out what you're taking in. So go out on your long run, take your gels or whatever your fuel source is, and write it down. What did I take in? How long was I out there? And how did I feel? A lot of the recommendations say take something in every 20 minutes. I think this is useful because then you're sort of spreading it out and you're not taking in like a giant load of carbs or of calories in one go. But if you feel good doing that, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with taking more in at one time and a little less a different time. I just think that could increase some GI issues. But again, everyone is so unique and everyone is so individual that you'll just have to test this out for yourself and figure out what you're doing and how you want to improve it. So taste fatigue. Yeah, I want to talk about taste fatigue a little bit. This generally happens. And again, I think that in our training runs, sometimes they're not long enough, or maybe we're not fueling like we fuel in a race to really get to this taste fatigue point. But it generally happens with sweet foods or sweet gels. So I would also recommend testing this out in your training before and having just a variety of things that you can eat. Some of them might be salty, some of them might be gels, some of them might be real food. I think thinking about texture and temperature is important because sometimes in a race, I think there's a tendency for everything to sort of be lukewarm. And I would really, if you can get something hot, if you can get something cold, I think that this sometimes helps make it more appetizing. Another thing to maybe help avoid some taste fatigue is to organize your fueling into blocks. So maybe I'm going to eat X gel for 2 to 4 hours. And then the next 2 to 4 hours, I'm going to eat something different or a different flavor, or I'm going to throw in some real foods. So I'm just sort of rotating it instead of saying, I'm going to eat this gel until I cannot take another sip of it. Just rotating things to avoid that taste fatigue. And then, yeah, keep a log. I think that's the biggest piece of advice that I could give everyone. Keep a log so that you know yourself. I also think I want to leave time for questions. But I want to go over this really quickly. I also think it's useful to go in. Here's our UTMB example and just see what's at the aid stations. So for example, okay, there's this snack drink. There's rice, and try some of these things out. Try some of them out in your training. And if it works for you when you get to the race, then that's one less thing that you have to carry. So if I know I love knack waffles, great. I'm going to eat them at the aid station and I'm not going to carry them. Just to save yourself a bit of weight. Yeah, common mistakes. I think we went over this already, but look at your chart. Look at what you think common mistakes are. Talk to people. Study the race. Read race reports and see what happens, other people's experiences, and really think through different scenarios in the race. And great, we have time for questions. These are just my takeaways. Strategies lead to success. The more strategies you have, the more studying of the race that you can do, the more success you can have in the race. And success, we're defining success however you want to define success. There's no correct way to run an ultra. This is your challenge. This is about you. The more you know yourself, the better you're going to be able to run your race. I could take Killian's training, download it all, and I'm gonna say I'm gonna do his exact training. I'm gonna have different results than he will. So there is absolutely no correct way. And that's what makes it fun. It's like a creative project. Okay. We have time. We have time for questions. I just have to find. Here we go. Okay. Does anyone have questions? Raise a hand. Okay. Open queue. Sorry that I'm not like. So I'm gonna unmute. Maybe I didn't unmute you. Hold on. Okay. Are you unmuted now? Nico.
Yeah. Can I speak French?
I just came from French class and
Okay.
it's not very good though.
Okay. Well, I will try with my English.
Okay, thank you.
So I will run into UTMB for the first time.
Okay.
Yeah. And I just have a question because the first time I won a long trail, it was not an ultra. I have a lot of pain, how can I say, irritation, with the heat of the skin. It will create, some pain, and it's really hurtful. I mean,
Is
and
it?
so now I use knock, the cream knock,
Mm-hmm.
which is for me the best, but I need to put it, each 20 kilometers in an ultra. So do you have on your side a specific way to attenuate this, or to use the same thing, or?
I do have a cream that is called Squirrel's Nut Butter.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm sure there's many kinds that work. This one I find works really well, and they have like small packaging, which I also think is nice because then you can just put it in your pocket
Mhm.
and have it for during the race. Because yes, I think actually this is important because those small irritations, when normally maybe it wouldn't bother you, when you're in an ultra and you're tired and you're fatigued, they can really be irritating.
Mhm.
Everything is increased.
Is it possible to share the link of your products you use?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Um, Squirrel's Nut Butter. Are there any other questions? Hold on. I will put this here. Yes.
Hello, can you
Hello.
hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, my name is Veli. So
Hi.
thank you for this event first. And my question is because now I want to develop more speed, for example, and slowly I want to switch to longer races. For example, now I'm doing just like 20K with 1,000 meter elevation races.
Mm-hmm.
But for these races, I need speed, so I do some interval sessions on the track and field and stuff. For switching to ultras, should I keep the intervals, or it's better just to spend more hours in the mountain, like low heart rate, longer hours?
I
Like,
think you want to keep your speed. I think you want to keep speed work in there. I think that sometimes this is a mistake that happens a lot. I'm going to do an ultra, so I'm going to be running slowly so I don't work on speed. But I think that speed is really important. So yeah, I would keep it in there. And
yeah,
for
okay,
example, one thing that you could do is look at your intensity, so how much intensity you're doing. And if you want to increase volume, maybe lower the intensity a little bit, but don't take it all out, and then increase your volume. so that you're not creating two kinds of stress. Like you're reducing one stress, but you're increasing another. That's what I would do.
I see then. Yeah. Okay. So I'm doing like a two sessions per week for like speed. Maybe I do one session, but more volume total, like in
Yeah.
week
So-
volume.
Yeah, maybe the other day, instead of intensity, you're doing a longer run, because that will be more intense. It's just
Yeah.
not speed worker.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
I want to say something before, just so we don't run out of time, and I think is really important, is that we have, I think I mentioned this at the beginning, but we organized a group run. It's a social run next week. I just want to encourage everyone to come. It's going to be like, it's just going to be, if you're in Chamonix, it's going to be on the river trail. It's going to be super flat. It's going to be fun. So I thought, well, maybe people have races, so they don't want to do something crazy. But it's just a time to get to know each other and meet other people to train with and meet each other. So anyway, that's an open invitation. Yes, we have, hold on, Jacob.
Yeah, hi there.
Hi.
Well, thank you. This webinar really confirmed to me that a large part of the ultra running isn't actually so much the running, but more the logistics. And then also the mental aspect. And that's where my question is, do you specifically do any mental training? Because I keep reading online that some people like get up at 2 a.m. to like train their night runs, or like train to run completely tired and then go back to bed. Is that something you do or do with your athletes?
I don't do that. I don't really recommend that. I mean, I think if you want to, you can. I think the issue is that since rest and recovery and sleep, like we read all about this new technology about how to recover better, and the thing that is most beneficial is sleep. It's showed study after study, sleep is like the only thing that is proven to really help for recovery. So I don't want to skip out on sleep. And that's kind of my biggest thing about, maybe should I get up in the middle of the night and run? I don't know. Like, is the benefit, I guess the question is the benefit worth losing sleep over, and then maybe having the rest of your week, you're just sort of tired and can't, you know, go through daily life, or you're training very well. So I think that's my issue with that.
Yeah, no, that's what I thought.
But yeah, mental training I think is important. I don't necessarily think that we have to like torture ourselves though, or suffer. Running is already hard. But I do think there are ways, like I was saying, like looking at your A, B, and C goal, or thinking about your why. Those are all ways of looking at mental training as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Nico.
Yeah, I think there was a person just before me, Bastien, I think.
Who did I miss? Maybe not.
Okay, so
Okay.
I will take the chance. No, I have small issues regarding NAC products, regarding specific electrolytes with melon testing and all this stuff. I really like the soup. The soup they product is really great, but I don't have a specific product for electrolytes, I think, because it make my mouth really dry, you know, the melon taste and all this stuff. So do you use it? Or I like the bars, the wafers also, and the soup, but I have pain with their liquid.
The electrolytes.
Yeah, the electrolytes. Yes.
I generally take my own, but sometimes I'll grab it from the aid station. But also, I mean, if you're taking in soup, that probably has like it's salt and other things in it, right? So it's better than just only drinking water throughout the entire race. I would just maybe see what you can find and see if there's anything that it might be also that it's just too sweet, or I know what you
Yeah.
mean, like the acidy flavor, and see what you can find.
And it
But I
can
would.
lead to it can lead to high glycemia also.
Oh, Max says I just use normal salt and squeeze of lemon. Yeah. No, I don't think that's a bad idea. I think if it's bothering you, then look for just a real basic way to get some more salt in. And so you're just avoiding only drinking water throughout the whole race.
And do you follow the nutrition plan of NAC as well, or because they recommend to eat a lot? I think is that something you eat a lot during ultra, or yeah,
I've had their
it's
their
difficult.
products a little bit, but not a ton. I think the most useful, I mean, for the race, if you look at what's in the aid stations, that's useful if you like that. But then in general, I say the more that you can eat, the better. Like just narrowing ourselves down to one product, I think is really limiting. And if you get sick of it, or you can't find it, or it's not working for you, then you're kind of at zero again. So I would say just try everything, try as much as you can and see. And another thing also is like, I don't think that we only have to use these sports products. Taking in some real food, and I'm sure for UTMB, taking in some real food will feel nice.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bastion.
What do you do if you encounter like a runner's knee or something like that?
Like during the race?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I mean, it's tough, right? Because when you're in a race, you really want to finish. You did a lot to get there and you want to get to the finish line. And I think it's a little bit about learning your body and what your body is feeling. I think when I first started, I definitely feel like there was some aches and pains that I thought was normal to run through. And now I see, oh, no, that's not normal. So I think it took me a while just to learn my body. And if I have, let us say I have a knee pain, now I think I'm better at identifying this is something that's not okay. This is something that's serious and I should stop. Or, okay, this is just, I don't know, this ache. And after the race is probably going to go away and won't be an injury. But it's hard to, it's hard to identify because I think that you have to kind of feel it and feel through your body and then learn what's normal and what's not normal.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Also though, I mean, going back to this, if that happens in a race, I think also there's time to stop and just sort of feel what's going on. You know, like maybe you stop. I don't know if it's also happened to me where I fall. Let's say I hit my knee, it hurts, and then I just kind of stop, take a breather, and then I think I'm gonna try to run a little bit more and see how it feels, and maybe it feels better. So I think like it's okay to take time and figure out what's going on, especially something long. This is the benefit I think of an ultra. We have time to problem solve, and sometimes just like taking a minute and not feeling rushed to figure out what's going on is the best thing you can do. Other questions? Julie. Julie, if you're talking, I can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, just in terms of response to the chafing comment, one of the strategies I was told, and really seems to work, in the week leading up to the race, moisturize your skin as much as you can, because that actually, again, the chafing happens because your skin is so dry, and it's the movement between your pack or whatever in the skin. So moisturize in the week leading up. If you have a chafing where your pack and that is, use things like a fixamol tape, that very thin tape, and put that across, because it's often easier to keep that on than applying cream the whole time. And the other thing I've just been told as a grandma is that nappy rash cream. So you can go to chemists or supermarkets and you can buy things like pseudo cream, nappy rash cream, which is much cheaper, but it's designed to protect sensitive skin, and it has zinc in it to heal. So I've found that has been fabulous for putting on those spots where you have skin to skin contact, and it can make such a difference.
Yeah, great, good advice.
Just
Yeah, I've used diaper rash cream, and you're right.
Cheaper and very effective, designed to protect baby skin, so it certainly can protect our skin.
And it comes in little containers.
Tubes.
Super
Little
easy
tubes.
to carry around.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. She recommended I'm going to write this.
It's nappy rash cream. The one I use is called Pseudo Cream, SUDOCREM. But you can, yes, it's diaper cream.
Or nappy
So we're
rash.
Australian, so yeah.
Depending on where you're from, it's
Yeah. But it's designed for babies' bottoms. So it can be really good.
yeah. I think the tape too, what you were saying.
Yeah, the tape, and particularly that's Fixamol, the FIXUMOL, I think is the one I tend to use. It's very thin. It's designed normally to go under bandaging. So but it just, because it's so thin and it adheres really well, and it's fairly broad. So I'll often put that strips across my back where the pack sits on the back, or if you have shorts that chafe, it's just good for large patches. Put it on the day before the race. So the moisturising is the week before, every day the week before. Like, just constantly make sure that your feet are really moisturised and your legs are moisturised. Because it helps the health of your skin. So pamper yourself.
Yes. So it's good for tapering.
Yeah, tapering
Felix.
time, pamper yourself.
Felix.
Hi.
Hi.
So I'm sorry if you already answered this, but you talked about power hiking, and my question is, if obviously you need a good technique, but is it would you say it's very personal, or is it always better to have a good power hiking technique than like running for the whole race? If you understand my question.
I think it depends on if you are planning on hiking in the race, I would practice that. I would practice a good power hiking technique. And yeah, I think there are some basic guidelines, but I think that it's also a little bit individual. And this is why I think going out and training like the power hiking as an intense session, like an intense interval. So maybe I want to see how much distance I can cover while I'm power hiking. I'm really going to push myself, and then see what works for you. Like trying it. I mean, like I would look at, and YouTube, there's a million videos about it. I would get like some basics and then see how it applies to you and how you feel comfortable too.
Okay.
If-
But
Yes. Did I answer your question?
no, I think you answered my question. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Great. Thank you for coming. If you have questions, reach out to me at any time. Come to our social run next week. Hang out, ask questions. Yeah. And thank you. Have a good night. And good luck on your races. I'll be cheering for you all. Bye.